Welcome to another Scouting the Room podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. That is Jason Staples. We are sponsored by Johnny T-shirt as always. We're going to a room that was flush with talent last year. Not so much this year. Maybe some talent, some very well unproven talent. Jason, the tight ends at North Carolina. We know Bill Belichick likes to use them. Let's go about it and get into it. Your overall thoughts before we break it down into the of pillars of excellency that we've been doing.
The pillars of excellency. Is that a
Got to keep it fresh.
with that and what you were saying off air right before we got on here? Whew. Yeah. So anyhow, I think the first thing to note here is that they've thrown numbers at this position, and they've thrown numbers at this position with body types and skill sets that, if they work out, could be pretty good. You know, you match problems in the passing game. You've got some guys that could be pretty versatile. You've got some big bodies that should be able to block if they want to. But we just don't really know about how it's going to work with any one of them, or really all of them in some sense. What you're doing at this point is you're throwing enough numbers at it that you're kind of presuming, look, you get these guys together, you throw the numbers at it, make them compete, and hopefully you get two guys out of this room that can really play. But we don't know. We don't know really what to expect from this room in a lot of ways. But like you said, there's a lot of talent, and, talent is a good place to start. And, that's what we're really here to assess.
Absolutely. If you're watching this show and you haven't watched the other ones, this is, I think, 5 or 6. We did all the defense and some of the offense. We worked inside out like we always do. And so we're on the tight ends. Of course, Jason's scouting reports on the Tar Pit Premium message boards, detailed written version of this. But Jason, we've done it for all the positions prior to now. We're going to do it now. Let's talk about the alpha in the room. Got a couple guys that have played some snaps. Nobody's played a ton. And then you got two guys that haven't played any, or at least not enough to register a written scout. But you're alpha of this group.
I think it really has to be Jake Johnson at this point. I mean, he's the one guy that's left on this roster that's played in a UNC uniform. We know he's got pretty solid talent. I mean, he was the number one tight end recruit in the country coming out of high school. Was highly regarded for good reason. I mean, he's just under 6'6", 240 plus. I mean, I'm really interested to see what he looks like after an offseason under this strength and conditioning regime, because the potential to be a little bit scarier body-wise has always been there, but he's never quite unlocked that, and I'm curious to see. They've said a lot about losing bad weight, gaining good weight, and the importance of nutrition. And there were some rumblings that they weren't real happy with the prior nutrition plan that the team was on, and feel like they're going to be better. They're going to have better body composition on this roster because of that. Well, this is one of the guys that I'm most curious to see. Right? This is one of the guys that I want to find out. Like, okay, I hear you, coach. I hear you. Folks in the Keenan,
Football
facility.
Center. KFC,
Football
man.
center.
Come on.
Yeah, KFC in the Keenan Football Center. Hey, it's been a long day for me, man. Long last few days. But I hear you what you're saying about, how much better things are going to be with, the nutrition differences and some of what you're doing in strength and conditioning. I hear you. And maybe there's some reason for optimism. But this is one of those guys that I'm circling, because the potential to be pretty good and to be, to get a little bit more flexible, to become a little bit more of a mauler in the running game, actually a lot more of a mauler in the running game, and to, he's got some nice tools to work with as a receiver. This is one of those guys that I want to see what happens with him, because I mean, you look at him, like I said, close to 6'6", great length. He's had room to add bulk, has been there on his scouting report since high school. Elite frame. But at some point, you got to go become a grown man and actually add the bulk to that frame to become the player that you're projected to be coming out of high school. He has the frame to be a really good blocker. He has not been a good blocker so far in his career. Gets thrown out a little bit. He has pretty dang good feet, naturally, but he's not real bendy. He's a guy that could really benefit from a more of a focus on mobility and strength through the corners of his mobility and his flexible range. You add a little bit there. He's got the hands. He's got the ability to box guys out in the passing game. That he could be a really good player. And again, was the number one guy coming out of high school for a reason. Is he, has he lived up to that at all so far? Not at all. And in some sense, you could put him as the needs to prove it guy as well. But to me, he's got to be your alpha. He's got to be the guy that sort of stirs the drink at this point. I mean, that's what you're hoping. But I think if they felt like he was the alpha coming out of the spring, they probably don't throw quite as many bodies at this in the portal on the other side of that. So he's an alpha that's got to prove he's the alpha.
That is Jake Johnson there on your screen, the alpha, according to Jason Staples. Also, I'm gonna throw it up, time to prove it, because we don't have a lot of guys to put in all these spots. But I agree with you. It's time for him to prove it. Like you mentioned, highly recruited out of high school, Texas A&M, with his brother, transferred to Carolina. He stayed dinged up a little bit. Some of the other coaching staff was a little bit frustrated that they couldn't get him healthy and couldn't get him up to speed health wise. Maybe that was on them. Maybe that's on Jake. Maybe it's some of both. But certainly
I still
some
think
of the things we
some
heard.
of that is just due to the lack of development, honestly.
Yeah.
In terms of
I mean,
the physical, the body not developing. And I think he got dinged up a little early in his career. And a lot of times when guys play early and they get dinged early, that really impacts their ability to develop their bodies so that they're more bulletproof for the future. For him, that's why like I said, I'm circling him as one of those guys. Can you get him physically developed enough to where he's unlocked and he's less likely to get hurt?
absolutely. Jake Johnson. We shall see if it comes to fruition there. Moving on down the line, let me get my screen right. I made our pictures a little bigger so they could see our ball heads more. Let's move down. We're talking scouting the room, the tight end room, with Jason Staples, one of our many in a long series of podcasts we're doing here in the off season, even though there is no off season. Let's go to young buck to watch, young gun to watch, young player to watch. There's a couple of them here. North Carolina, like you said, added some out of the portal. Some have played, some have not. Your thoughts here on this position?
Yeah, the young buck to watch to me is probably Shamar Easter. I think talent-wise, again, he was a guy that coming out of high school, he was regarded as a true blue chip kind of another one of those matchup nightmare types that you expected him to become a matchup nightmare type in college. 6'5", pushing on 230, kind of guy that you expect to be able to line up wide some and cause matchup problems out there, to be able to put in the H-back spot, in the sniffer role, in the slot, move him around and kind of get your nice matchups and use him vertically down the field and in the red zone. And then it just never really happened for him at Arkansas. He didn't really see the field in year one in 2023, and then he basically didn't see the field much in year two. He had 5 snaps in the opener, and then they moved him from tight end to wide receiver before the postseason exhibition game. So I think the Arkansas staff was just frustrated with him that they couldn't really find a way to unlock his potential. But the possibility of him to have potential to unlock was never in question. And then he, took up and left for Carolina, where he's hoping he can get developed by, the people who knew how to use Aaron Hernandez before, Aaron Hernandez did Aaron Hernandez things. So, that's kind of what he's hoping. I'm curious about this guy just because of the, that ability to kind of move around and be a versatile piece. In a lot of ways, he's a lot like a guy you had on the roster last year. And, Freddie Kitchens did pretty well with what they had there last year with that kind of versatile piece. So, that to me is a pretty solid choice for a young guy to watch. And of course, for last year, I'm referring to Bryson Nesbitt, and I think he's actually more talented overall. I think he's a little twitchier athlete than Nesbitt is. Nesbitt was more of he didn't run well at the combine for a reason. Little slower strider. I think Easter has more upside than a guy like Nesbitt, but he's just miles away from it in terms of what he's shown so far. But to me, he is that kind of young buck to watch with the possibility to become a real weapon in the passing game.
That is Shamar Easter, 6'5", 223-ish listed, at least on the Arkansas website. We'll see when those official ones come out. To your point, he hasn't played a ton and appears to have all the talent in the world. I like the Nesbitt comparison. Whew, that was an eye-opener on Combine Day or Pro Day at Carolina when we saw Nesbitt, and not really in a good way, but Shamar Easter there. Jason, let's back that out. Let's go to the breakout player. I feel like we could use a lot of these guys over and over and over on all this, but try to keep it mixed up. We've got a couple more we haven't mentioned, but your take as the breakout.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Connor Cox here. I think he's a guy that, again, he was another one of those who coming out of the state of Florida, out of Jacksonville, coming out of high school, showed a lot of potential. Was highly regarded going into South Carolina, and then just never really fully blossomed in terms of where he was there. But again, another young guy. And the reason that I've got him as a breakout guy is he's one of those guys where I think, especially already being here in the spring, I think that was big for him. And I think he's a guy that just in terms of the extra weight that he's already carrying, he's a guy that's closer to having his frame ready this year. You look at a guy like Shamar Easter at 225, he's listed at 223. If they want to actually play him in the box at all at tight end, that's pretty light in the butt. But Cox is 245. Right? I mean, Cox is a big dude. And, maybe he's 250 by the opener. Now you've got a guy that you can pair with a guy like Jake Johnson, maybe challenge Jake Johnson for the starting role and have a guy that's a little bit more of a two-way threat in terms of being able to block and be a threat in the passing game. Because he's not the most fluid guy in the world, but he does have pretty decent overall. He's got enough movement skills that you feel like you can do something there in the passing game. In some ways, if Shamar Easter is Bryson Nesbitt, in a lot of ways, I think Connor Cox is sort of a natural replacement for John Copenhaver. But I think he's a little bit more. He's a more talented in terms of frame and overall burstiness player than Copenhaver was. Remains to be seen if he catches the ball as well as Copenhaver. And Copenhaver, he was dinged up at times, and that impacted his ability to be a reliable blocker as often as he could have been if he was healthy. But, he was a guy that fought hard as a blocker. And if Cox kind of applies himself in that way, I think he could have that same kind of impact and same kind of role, but from a guy who's a bigger athlete, who I think actually is also a faster athlete, at least in straight speed. I'm not sure he's any more fluid, but I think he's a bigger and faster athlete. So if there's a guy on this list that I'm sort of circling as a breakout guy, to me it's Connor Cox.
Connor Cox from South Carolina comes in. That is him on the screen catching a touchdown pass. We believe it looks like an NIL commercial or something where they can't have their numbers or anything on there. But that's Cox from the Practice Like a Pro Day game. Moving on down the list, this is Jason Staples talking about Inside Carolina's scouting series, scouting the room here, the tight ends. We've got one more. I don't really know how we can do it. You see it scrolling at the bottom, Mr. Consistency. I'm not quite sure if this spot doesn't go empty. I mean, we still got Jordan Owens to talk about, but he hadn't played any.
Yeah, I think that's the sticky wicket. Now Jordan Owens has 995 career snaps. Right, he's a guy that has played. He just hasn't played at this level. He played at Central Arkansas, and when you turn on that tape, you see a big lumbering athlete, a guy who is more of a jumbo type player, and he looks huge compared to the guys he's playing against. I mean, it just doesn't. It's sort of funny in certain ways, but he's not the explosive athlete, or none of these guys are really explosive. The closest is Easter, who's got some actual kind of receiver movement, but he's the least bursty of this group and sort of the most lumbering. But at 6'6", and he's listed at 255, I think he might well be 260, 265 by the time season comes around, depending on how they do it. But to me, he's the guy that they brought in to be the masher. If you watch his tape, he's not a guy that's going to run away from you and cause major problems in the vertical game. But he is a guy that, he's got the frame to box some guys out. He's got really good natural hands. So, kind of a red zone type threat in certain contexts where he can box guys out and find space. But really the thing that you hope for here, I think, is that he becomes really a masher in the run game. And, he transferred to Oklahoma State for the spring and then just really never won anything there in terms of being able to win a role. So he's coming to Carolina, he wants to play. Well, he may have a natural carved out position as a guy that can, if you can block reliably with that frame for Freddie Kitchens this year, you're probably going to find ways to get on the field because Kitchens wants to run the rock. They want to be big up front and they want to run the rock. And if they can go two tights, one back at times and move those guys around and ask them to just mash, they would love to do that. He's going to have some opportunities to be as a blocker, a Mr. Consistency guy for this team, and then, have some options on some boots and things like that in the passing game. So I'm going to put him down as Mr. Consistency, though I'm not sure he's actually going to win a job at all. But in what I see as his likely role, if he's able to win a job as really the kind of blocking first tight end, that would make him, a good candidate for this role.
Yeah, and I don't mean to slight Central Arkansas, but it's a big step up for him. We'll say that. Wrapping up, talking about Jason Staples, Johnny T-Shirts, our sponsor. Don't forget to check them out, Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. If you're reading these scouting reports, that means you should have the Inside Carolina code for Johnny T-Shirt to get 10% off your order. Scouting the room, last one. Where does this room rank on the team? In the ACC, it's another one of those ones that's tough because you don't have you've got one guy that's played on the Carolina team. You've got other guys that come from all over. It seems like we're talking about the DL room again, the linebacker room again, everywhere, transfer field. But where does this room rank for you, Jason?
To me, on the team, this is probably like number 4 on the offense. Somewhere in there, maybe it could be anywhere from number 4 to number 6 on the offense in terms of or maybe number 3 to number 6. I don't think it's as good a room as, say, the quarterback room or the offensive line room on this offense. I think the wide receiver room is probably comfortably ahead of this group, but it might end up being a better group than the running back group. Maybe if a couple of these guys work to their potential, they can challenge the receiver group a little bit. There's some possibilities there, but I think it kind of fits comfortably in that probably 4 or 5 range on the offense. And then in terms of the ACC, I think this is a pretty average room, honestly. Now, it's got, because of some of the athletes in there, I mean, the combination of Cox, Easter, and Johnson, all three of those guys were highly regarded coming out of high school for a reason. All of them have the frame. All of them have plus movement skills for guys that are, 6'5" plus. All of them have the potential to be a matchup problem, but none of them have proven it yet. None of them have done it. And there are a couple of places in the ACC where I think they've got tight ends. They've got guys that can be really good. I mean, regardless of, Miami of Florida lost Arroyo from last year, but they've got a pipeline of like 3 tight ends that they've recruited that you just, based on what they showed in limited time before, they're going to have some decent tight ends down there. You've got Clemson, I think, probably a good bit above. I think, you've got to have Aronde Gadsden up at Syracuse. If he's in the room, it's a better room than this room, given what he's shown in the past. So, I think comfortably, this is no better than maybe 5th or 6th in the ACC as I see it right now. It's got a little bit of upside. It could work its way a little higher than that, but I'd say right in that mid-range, sort of average range in the ACC is what I would see from this room going into the season. And like I said, there's upside. They've got enough bodies that if one of those guys clicks, all of a sudden that, could be a top 3 or 4 room. But I don't see that as something that I'm comfortable projecting coming into the season.
Ronnie Gatson, is he like 30 years old yet? He's been around. It feels like he's been around forever. But I get your point with the room ranks.
You know what? I just double checked it. He's now in the NFL. He did leave this year.
I was going to say. I mean, I see Ronnie Gatson the second. Yeah,
he's with the Chargers now. Okay, I missed that he actually went in the 5th round this year. Okay, so maybe they're ahead of Syracuse.
If he's in the room, they probably are ahead of North Carolina. But he will be lost if he's in the room. It is at least we have fun doing these. Tight end room for North Carolina.
It's impossible right now, honestly, unless you are spending inordinate hours a day. It is almost impossible to know who's on every roster right now because there's been so much movement. Every team has 40 new guys, and Gadsden was hurt a good bit last year too. So that's neither here nor there. But like I said, just keeping track of some of that. It's just I'm still in the process of working through other rosters now as well, and that's wow.
You know what's crazy? Aronde Gatson's high school coach, Patrick Surtain.
Yeah, we are now Florida State's cornerback coach.
We are getting old.
Patrick Surtain was really fun to watch in the pros.
Yeah, but he's head coaching now. I mean, it's crazy. Or he's coaching football now. I remember him playing, to your point. Let's get out of here. That's the tight end room for North Carolina. A lot of talent, a lot of unproven talent. A lot of guys got to step up, show and prove. The room ranks mid ACC, an average room. But
average room with room to move up in the standings because of the bodies. That's kind of where I put them.
Yep, and you don't have a better coaching staff or a better head coach that's proven to make some tight ends, look pretty good.
It could be a top 3 room by the end of the season. I mean, that's the thing. You got
to stay healthy.
Got the dudes, but they got to stay healthy. And some of those guys, if Jake Johnson and Connor Cox alone, if just those 2 guys hit their ceilings this year, it's top 3, top two room in the ACC.
That'll be big time.
Can we project that? Can we expect that? Neither shown it yet.
Don't get me started. You're going to make me start thinking 12. We're getting out of here. This is the Inside Carolina Scouting the Room series. The tight ends, that's Jason Staples. I'm Tommy Ashley. Johnny T-Shirts, always your sponsor. Go check them out at johnnytshirt.com or on Franklin Street. And stay tuned for the next Scouting in the Room. We'll be doing wide receivers next, sometime next week. Whenever Jason's series finishes up on the wide receivers, we'll be doing one of these. We'll talk to you soon.